Being a thief in the Fire Emblem series kinda puts you in a really weird position. On one hand, your utility is near essential in every game, and it'll be a way harder experience without your presence around to help things out. But on the other hand, who's really excited to deploy a thief in a chapter they'd be useful in? Who sees a map with a bunch of doors and chests and goes, "Oh yeah, baby, it's time for Rickard"? Thieves are a valuable asset, but it's just more fun to watch Shannon swing his sword a completely unnecessary amount of times than it is to watch Lithis open a door. There are some exceptions, but for the most part, thieves are units that people oftentimes sorta forget about and then push to the wayside. Which is likely why, in Binding Blade, few fans of the games probably even remember Astolfo as a character. He's the best thief in the game from a unit standpoint, having the best base stats of the three thieves, and since Fire Emblem 6 reverted the thief's ability to promote, that's really all he needs to work, but he just doesn't have a strong enough initial presence to be memorable. Chad has the fact that his name has joined the ranks of Karen and Kyle as a meme just by existing, and Kath has her child communist propaganda that makes her stand out in people's memory, but Astolfo just kinda exists. You'd have to dive into his supports to find the interesting stuff, and without a strong first impression, it's understandable why most people deploy Astolfo, but don't really care about him all that much. But make no mistake, Astolfo, for whatever godforsaken reason, is perhaps the most fleshed out and well-developed character in the entirety of the Binding Blades roster. He has an origin story, an interesting backstory, a relevant tie to a major story event, character development. He's as fleshed out as some proper main characters in other JRPGs. So, I want to take you on a journey through the life of Astolfo, from his unlawful beginnings, to his falling in love, and to the tragedy that ultimately rips it all away. So sit down and grab a box of tissues. If you thought last episode's video on Iran got depressing, Astolfo's ready to clear that bar with some room to spare. Astolfo didn't start his Ostia spy career on the greatest of foot. He began as nothing more than a meager thief, breaking into people's houses and stealing whatever the hell it was he felt like snatching. One night, however, he set his sights on a much bigger target than your average house. He targeted the Ostia castle itself, hoping to loot the royal treasury for all he could hold. And he managed to get to the loot effortlessly. He passed by the guards and picked all the locks as if he was breaking into Walmart, I guess. I don't know what places are easy to steal from. But while his get in was easy, as he went to make his get away, someone was waiting for him outside the treasury door. None other than King Hector himself greeted Astolfo, while Astolfo had 2 hands full of stolen goods. Astolfo, understandably, was damn near ready to empty the contents of his bowels into his pants. If it were like a guard or something, he would be fine, but the king himself? Astolfo was terrified enough just looking at him, but what confused him more was the fact that Hector wasn't doing anything. He just stood there and stared at Astolfo with a blank expression, until he broke that silence with a loud, bellowing laugh. He wasn't angry at Astolfo. In fact, he was incredibly amused that a man could so easily sneak past the guards and almost pull off such an incredible heist. And what did Hector decide to do with the thief who was in the middle of stealing from his country? Well, he did the only logical thing, offer him a job as a spy of Ostia. And in response to this incredibly logical reaction, Astolfo did the only thing in this exchange that made a lick of sense. He ran for his life. However, Hector made no attempts to stop the runaway thief. He willingly let Astolfo break free with loot in hand. This confused Astolfo to the point that he even had to stop running for a moment and ask Hector what the hell he was doing. And Hector responded, "Flee if you wish. You may keep the treasure as well. But does that make you happy? Do you want to live your life in the shadows in constant fear of being found? Is that really what you want?" Well, those words rung true with Astolfo, and after a night spent pondering the events of his heist, he returned to King Hector, gave back all the loot, and swore fealty to the crown. Not the most normal job application, but one that ended with him now living in a more respectable position in life. After this, he worked as a spy and was doing spy things for an unspecified period of time. You know, learning government secrets, assassinating secretive targets, sapping engineers' turrets, all that good stuff. However, one day, things went south. He was sneaking around Burns Castle for some unspecified reason, but to make a long story short, a job went south. Real far south. I'm talking bottom end of Chile far south. Astolfo was left bleeding and unconscious in the middle of the Nevada desert, and by some grace of God, he was saved by the desert's guardian, Igren. Though, when he regained his consciousness, he had found that he had lost his memory. Ostia and Hector became nothing to him, and he was given a new home and a new name, Gerlois. And it was where, for a brief period of time, Gerlois lived a normal and happy life among the desert people. He and Igren hit it off very quickly, and before long the two of them were wed in holy matrimony. Think about that. This got with this. This got with this.
There is still hope for you, buddy.
And Igren and Gerlois were even blessed with a daughter, and their lives passed by idly in the desert sand. However, as time went on, Gerlois slowly started to remember himself. Ostia, Hector, Astolfo, his memories slowly began to resurface, and with these memories, so too did the knowledge of the dangers of being a spy resurface. Spies held invaluable information, and as such, they would often be coerced into giving such information by means of torture, and if the spies' lips remained tight, their loved ones would be tortured instead, or worse. Fearing such a fate for his wife and daughter, Astolfo threw away the life and the name of Gerlois, faking his own death and vanishing from the desert, leaving behind his wife and daughter forever. Or at least he thought he was leaving them behind forever. And at long last, we reach the events of the game proper, where Astolfo is recruited in the heat of Legance's rebellion of Ostia. He appears just as Roy's forces mount an assault on Legance from inside of the castle, offering to help them rescue Lelina from his clutches. His introduction portrays him as very good at his job, able to ascertain Lelina and Legance's positions and current status, and he also expresses a wry sense of humor, taunting Merlinus for judging him solely on his humble appearance, and using a very casual manner of speaking to impress the incredibly big problem of Ostia being overrun by treacherous rebels. But as it turns out, Astolfo wasn't caught off guard by Legance's rebellion at all. He and Barth had snuffed out Legance's plot well before he tried to make it happen. However, Lelina was hesitant to act on it, as she did not want to doubt one of her father's loyal knights, so she disregarded the plot and chose to have faith in Legance. This would go on to be described as a very, very bad and very, very poor decision. But despite the fact that Astolfo tried his best to protect Hector and Lelina, he was too late to save Hector's life, something that Astolfo wears as a true badge of shame, personally blaming himself for Hector's defeat to Burns' dragons. Which, to be honest, I blame more on Hector himself for forgetting the fact that Athos told him Burn was a problem. And how does Astolfo cope with the loss of his beloved king? Well, by doing what any logical person would do, heavy and excessive drinking. Astolfo is actually a really bad alcoholic, as in his support with Boers, he's shown to drink on the job, to the point of being heavily intoxicated, rambling on about his guilt over giving Hector quote-unquote bad intel. He remarks on how sad it was that Hector had such a useless spy such as him, continuing to berate himself for his own shortcomings. Something about Ostia just attracts really depressed spies. Between Matthew's dead lover and Astolfo's everything? I don't know, maybe just being really depressed was part of the Ostian job prerequisites. But Boers will have none of Astolfo's self-deprecating nonsense. He remarks that the fall of Lord Hector shouldn't be blamed on any one man. They should all shoulder the blame together, and so too should they shoulder the burden of moving on. He says that Astolfo is not alone, and when Astolfo asks him why he would stand up for such a quote-unquote useless wretch like him, Boers remarks that he believes Astolfo to be a proud knight. He might be a spy, but he still fought with his life to protect king and country, and that makes him a man worthy of the title. Astolfo can't find the words to reply, as he starts to break into tears and sobs, perhaps feeling as though the burden of guilt might finally be able to be lifted from his shoulders. So, okay, we've addressed Astolfo's guilt over the death of Hector, but there was another part of his past that needed addressing, his former life as Gaulois. Astolfo, as I would imagine much to his surprise, actually runs into Ygraine again in the Liberation Army. She recognizes him immediately, though he attempts to play ignorant, brushing her off by saying that they say there are at least 3 people on the continent with the same face. Ygraine isn't so easily swayed, however, and she asks to see his leg. Back when he was beaten up in Nabata, there was a particularly nasty gash on Gaulois' leg, one that left a scar. Astolfo brushes her aside, saying that he has no such scar and making up an excuse to get out of there. However, it is worth noting he never showed her his leg. This is, of course, a bold-faced lie. In his supports with Wendy, she tries to drag him into being more professional and taking his job more seriously. It's the slacker and straight-laced one routine, not really original, but what is interesting is when she goes to pull him away, he loses his balance and falls over. There, Wendy sees the scar on his leg, likely because, unlike Ygraine, Astolfo has no reason to hide it from her. He says that he can't do much on that leg because of an injury he got, quote, a long time ago, being purposefully vague about the time frame before changing the subject away from it. So while it's never addressed in the Ygraine support, as it's merely implied that he's lying in there, the Wendy support outright gives us the proof that he is lying. Anyways, back at the Ygraine support, she tells Astolfo all about her ex-husband Gaulois, saying all the stuff about how they met and lived together, how they fell in love, all the stuff I've told you already. Astolfo attempts to get her to stop pursuing this line of thought, telling her that her husband is probably dead and that she should move on from him. He even makes a pass at her, saying he could kiss her in place of her dead husband, likely a ploy to get her to think he's some kind of gross lecher. It works for a moment, as she slaps him and leaves, but Ygraine isn't stupid. She knows that Astolfo is Gaulois, and she intends to prove it to him. In the conclusion to their support, Ygraine comes to Astolfo with an emblem, and no, not the fire one. It's a seal carried by Lycian spies. It seems that Astolfo wasn't the most careful in his departure, and he left it behind when he faked his own death. Ygraine now realizes why Astolfo ran away. It was to protect his family from the dangers of his profession, and thus they give each other their parting words. I'm sorry to say this to you, but that guy is dead. He was devoured by the quicksand of Nabata. All this stuff about spies and whatnot, it's just your imagination. Or perhaps you saw an illusion in the desert heat. I see. Then I must have been dreaming. I must have had a dream of a short period of happiness. Ygraine, no, sorry, forget it. Just forget it all, please. And that truly is how it ends. There are no paired endings in Binding Blade for people not named Roy, so that farewell truly is the end of their story. But then again, maybe not. Astolfo's ending remarks that he helped to rebuild Lycia, though nothing else about him is known, and Ygraine's ending says that she was seen here and there all over the continent, but how exactly she spent the rest of her life is also unknown. This might be an incredible reach on my part, but I like to believe that they met again someday, as the vagueness in their paired endings left that a slim, but not impossible probability. And maybe, just maybe, that spy who dreamt of happiness awoke and found that he could make that dream a reality. Thank you guys so much for watching yet another Fire Emblem character analysis video. I think I'm going to take a break from Eelb for the time being and move on to somewhere else. A huge thanks, as always, to the Green Brigand, my ever-present and helpful companion throughout all of these. If you enjoyed the video, please feel free to leave a like on the video, leave a comment on the video, subscribe to the channel for more content, and ring the bell for notifications. And while you're at it, name your avatar's paint next time you play through a Fire Emblem game. Next time, I think we're going to keep the desert theme going from this video and cover the branded king of Tellius. Until then...